What is up, Phenom fam? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the psychological phenomenon behind loot boxes. Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're talking about the psychological phenomenon behind loot boxes. And the information I'm going to be getting from this is from a research paper that I did for my English class this past semester. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I'm just going to focus on specific paragraphs because the research paper as a whole, we had to take an artifact from our generation, which I chose loot boxes, and a trait that my generation, so millennials, possesses, which I did, addiction. And then we had to, like, I don't know, kind of like compare it and show how that could lead to other things. So I ended up doing loot boxes, and being addicted to loot boxes translates to gambling, and then translates to a gambling addiction. But I'm not going to be focusing on that part. I'm going to be focusing on the psychology behind loot boxes and how they're essentially just designed firsthand to prey on the psychology of the human mind. And it's actually kind of sick when you think about it. So I'm just going to focus on specific paragraphs, like I said. All right, let's get into the first paragraph here. I'm probably going to butcher this name, so I apologize. But Emil Hodzik, the leader of the Video Game Addiction Treatment Clinic, says, quote, "In behavioral psychology, that randomized system of reward is the one that creates the most addiction," end quote. In reference to the game Overwatch, he says, quote, "Then that dynamic of the gambling, the poker machine motivation system comes in, whereby you get one really good skin or emote one time, and it wants you to get more. Over time, the interest in the attachment and the drive for what you get from the loot drop can definitely increase, especially when they've got the season things like a Halloween event," end quote. So there's not really much to elaborate on there, but essentially what he's saying is that people are more prone to being addicted to random rewards than they are to fixed ones. So he's essentially saying that a loot box is way more predatory and way more addictive than just if they had each skin laid out and you would just buy like pay like $1 or $2 for a skin, or like 50 cents for an emote, like specific ones that you wanted. So yep, that's pretty much what he's saying. Okay. Part of this addictive phenomenon is just how our brains work in terms of fixed rewards versus random ones. Psychologist Jamie Madigan, I probably butchered that again, so sorry, says, quote, "A lot of research shows that fixed rewards are not as effective for getting people to change behaviors, learn a new behavior, or form a habit as random rewards are," end quote. He goes on to explain that the repetitive nature of earning these boxes in-game is what leads to not only the addiction, but to spending real money on loot boxes when you aren't earning enough of them in-game. Not really much to elaborate on there. It's kind of just restating what the first person said. Random rewards, much more enticing to the brain than fixed ones. A great analogy for how loot boxes affect our psychology is when they're compared to a Skinner box. SimplyPsychology.org has an article about the Skinner box, sometimes also referred to as an operant conditioning chamber, where, specifically for this example, mice are placed in the box where a response lever is placed. One group of mice is given a treat for every time they push the lever, while another group of mice was given a treat only randomly with a variable schedule of rewards. It was observed by B.F. Skinner, the psychologist the experiment is named after, that the rats who were randomly rewarded pushed the lever on an almost compulsive level, while the ones that were rewarded every time seldom pushed the lever. So essentially, just driving home the fact that random rewards are like super addictive. A blog post on nearandfar.com helps explain this phenomenon more in depth. These variable rewards lower the brain's defenses as it tries its best to work out a pattern for when the rewards are dispensed. This helps plant the seeds to form the habit. We perceive this subconsciously as fun in the example of loot boxes, since we are searching endlessly for our next reward. Once we receive the reward, the brain again tries to make out a pattern and in turn allows the habit to strengthen, and the cycle repeats. So essentially, in the terms of loot boxes, what this means is, let's say, for instance, Call of Duty. I get the gun that I want, and my brain's like, cool. Like, when am I going to get the next good thing? Like, what's the pattern here? And then as my brain tries to figure that out, it lowers its defenses for a habit to form of, oh, cool, these loot boxes are fun as hell to open, like, regardless. So I'm just going to keep going, keep opening them. And cycle repeats once you get something good again, and it just keeps strengthening it. So what does this mean in terms of loot boxes? Well, it means that the people who develop these loot box systems use this psychological phenomenon to their advantage. The random loot that these boxes drop have a similar effect on gamers that the random treat had on the mice. This is meant to keep the gamers pulling the lever by opening more and more boxes. The end goal for the developers is to get you to spend real money to open them. Not much to elaborate on there. I won't go super in-depth on this one. Some developers take extra steps to try to persuade you to buy loot boxes. According to Alex Osborne, writer for IGN.com, Activision, the publisher of popular games such as Call of Duty, Destiny 2, among others, filed a patent in 2015 for online matchmaking that is directly influenced by loot boxes. The simple explanation goes like this. The game identifies a loot item that you want and matches you with players of a much higher skill level who possess that item. The reason for this is the developers think once you see someone performing so well with this item, that you will be more likely to purchase loot boxes in an attempt to earn that item. The patent also goes further, stating that if a person does purchase loot boxes and earns the item they want, they will be matched against players of a lower skill level, and this is done in an attempt to give you positive reinforcement for spending your real money on these boxes, trying to persuade you to repeat the transaction in the future. Now, I explain it in the next paragraph, but essentially someone from Activision said this was a quote, exploratory patent, and that it's not in any of its games, and it doesn't plan to implement it, but I kind of doubt that. I mean, I believe that it's not in any games right now, but if it's something that you don't plan on putting in a game, then why would you take the time to patent it, you know what I mean? So that's just my opinion, but also, according to the same IGN article, an Activision spokesperson has said that this was an exploratory patent and it is yet to be implemented into any of its games and that there are no current plans to do so. And then I just put in my own opinion. I said, tactics like this alone are deplorable in my opinion. Trying to trick the very people keeping your game afloat into spending extra money after already buying a $60 game is absurd. And on top of that, trying to reinforce your behavior after giving in to their deception is not fair. Now, I have a big problem with this, because I understand loot boxes in free-to-play games or games that are giving like the rest of its DLC away for free or whatever, but something like, especially Call of Duty, I keep using Call of Duty as an example because it's the game I play by far the most, but something like Call of Duty, you pay $60 for the base game, okay? Then they put out 4 map packs for each game, which are technically $15 a pop, but you could buy the season pass for $50. So bare minimum to get the full experience of the game, you already have to pay at least $110. Assuming you don't get like a special edition of the game that probably comes with like a bonus map that you can only get for having the special edition or whatever. So bare minimum to get the full experience of the game, you're looking at $110 if you buy the season pass. And then you have the supply drops that they want you to spend more money on. And like, especially with Call of Duty, it's the best-selling game like by far every year. So they make more than enough money just off of like their base game sales alone to support like the following games, you know what I mean? I don't know. Stuff like that just kind of makes me mad. Like, something like... I don't even think Titanfall 2 has any, like, microtransactions, really. I could be wrong about that, but, like, Titanfall 2, all of its DLC is free. You just buy the base game and you get the full experience. Is there some form of DLC? I really don't know. But if you were giving away all the DLC for free, it'd be something else to, like, want people to buy loot boxes, you know what I mean? Or like something like Overwatch, like, every new map, every new mode gets added for free You just buy the game once, and you get the full experience as new stuff comes out. And it's just, hey, if you want to spend money on loot boxes, here it is. That patent, though, like, that's absurd. I had a what if, which I think is kind of eye-opening when you think about it. So, what if Netflix charged you money for a chance to watch the next episode of Stranger Things? Or if Spotify charged you for a chance to hear the next song on Kendrick Lamar's new album? People would outrage and call out Netflix or Spotify on mass levels. But for some reason, gamers don't. Only very recently have outraged players taken the fight back to developers, and it has only started within the past month. In an open letter to video game developers posted on Reddit, user Ken's Gold, a 19-year-old man, extensively described his addiction to loot boxes. He claims to have spent $10,000 on loot boxes within the past 5 years. He described it as starting by spending $10 of his allowance every 2 weeks on a mobile game, and evolved into spending 100% of his paycheck on loot boxes. He has since forced himself to never purchase a game that has any type of loot box system in place because he fears he would not be able to control himself. Now, again, another extreme case of this, but it really can happen to anybody. Let's see. Okay. While the Netflix example may seem extreme, that it would possibly keep people from progressing through the show without spending more money, the gaming industry is starting to do terrible things very close to this premise. In the game Need for Speed Payback, an EA game, that's not in the paper, but the newest game in the street racing franchise, a similar system is implemented. As you progress through the game, your car will need upgrades in order to compete with the tougher, faster racers you encounter later in the game. The problem is, the upgrades for your car are locked behind a loot box system with a painfully slow earn rate. Eventually, you get to a certain point in the game where your car is way too slow to compete, even if you have the best car available to you at that point. This is to basically force you to buy loot boxes with real money to upgrade your car to compete. I have tried every possible thing other than spending money, and it is almost impossible to progress past the point I have reached. Now, this is true. This was when I was actually playing Need for Speed Payback. I don't remember specifically where in the game it was, but I had the best car available to me in that, like, car class at the time. And I think the car level I was supposed to be, it was, like, recommended, like, 280 or something like that, and I was, like, 202. And there was, like, a string of, like, 2 or 3 missions where it was like that. And, like, I tried for hours, like, multiple days in a row, and I could not get past this string of like 3 races or whatever. It's like I wasn't even coming close, like, but I would race the best race that I ever raced in my life, my racing career, and I'd come in like 4th place. And like not even a close 4th, like it'd be like the top 3 were like a good mile ahead of me the entire race, and then I'd finish 4th. Just stuff like that. Like I eventually got past it without spending money, but like I cheesed it pretty hard. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. First of all, I think single-player games with loot boxes is super stupid anyway, but granted it's an EA game, so... So what's my point here? If game developers aren't afraid to put a paywall in front of you, keeping you from experiencing the full game that they worked on, then what is stopping Netflix from stopping you from experiencing the full season of Stranger Things without an extra premium? I fear not much is stopping them. Thankfully, gamers have started to take the fight back to developers, letting them know loud and clear that there is, at the very least, a right and wrong way about doing loot boxes. Then it just kind of goes into the Star Wars Battlefront 2. You guys already know about that, I'm sure. Before I continue, this isn't a sexism thing or anything like that. It was... my professor forced us to focus on... it didn't really make any sense, because we were supposed to pick a trait that aren't, like, most people in our generation possess. But then we had to focus on, like, one specific demographic of them. So I had to pick males ages 15 to 25. So, with that in mind, let's restart the paragraph. So loot boxes have been shown to capitalize on the psychological nature of humans in an attempt to get us addicted to opening them. This in turn has seen many players, specifically males between the ages of 15 and 25, to spending real money on opening these loot boxes once the desire to open them has overcome the rate at which they are earned. This has led to some players developing a gambling addiction on loot boxes, similar to a gambling addiction one would see in a casino. It should be seen as a serious issue, not only because any type of addiction is unhealthy, but it preys on underage children who are not even legally old enough to go to a casino. This should be seen as a fire that is hopefully extinguished from the gaming industry before it spreads and engulfs the before its spreads and engulfs other industries, causing an inferno of monetization by greedy corporation. Just my closing thoughts on this. Loot boxes, while they seem innocent on the surface, a majority of them are developed with this psychological phenomenon in mind. And it's pretty sick. I mean, I can't think of a game off the top of my head that has loot boxes that you can't straight up buy with real money. And that's the point. Unfortunately, that is the entire point of them. And it sucks, but unless we start fighting back the developers on a mass level, then they're here to stay, because they make developers so much money, because people just, they get addicted and then they can't stop spending. So it sucks, but we'll have to see what happens. So guys, I don't ever ask you to share my videos, but if you could please share this video, let people know the predatory nature of loot boxes, because it's kind of sick when you think about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something new, something useful. If you did, be sure to pack a punch that like button. Be sure to subscribe. Have a phenomenal day. And guys, Phenom out.